is actually going to be the
McKinsey, то, что
next
говорит, люди
biohub,
слушают.
and why Asia is a very exciting place for industrial biotechnology.
Он такой важный?
Да. Парень отвечает за все McKinsey, изменение климата.
A few remarks, though, and
Обычно то, что они
as a
говорят.
consultant, we can provide you with some figures of markets and how they grow. I will let all the specifics on countries and companies to the actual presenters after me. But let's remind ourselves where we are today. In fact, in 2008 and 2009, our economy is already bio-based. We use 10% of biomass already today to generate power and heat. We use about 5% of biofuels for our transportation fuels. And we use about 7% of all chemicals today that are produced from biosources. And very notable on the chemical side, about 40% of those chemicals are actually produced in Asia. These are rubber, nutraceuticals, natural extracts, but also, as was mentioned before, palm oil, other oils, oleochemicals. There's a lot of amino acids produced in Asia. In fact, Asia was the first place where industrial production of amino acids started at the beginning of last century. Not many people know that. We also see tremendous growth overall in the bio-based economy, both on chemicals, in biofuels that you have all shown over the last few days, but also in producing energy, heat and electricity. The growth in chemicals we expect to go from about 100 billion euro to 300 to 450 billion euros in 2020. In fact, bio-based chemicals will be one of the main growth driver for the chemical industry. On the biofuel side, biofuels are already today the #1 alternative fuel. Electric vehicles are expected to be second in 2020, and there's tremendous growth in sugarcane and second generation, like cellulosic and algae. We've all heard about that today and yesterday. Why is Asia attractive as a biohub? In fact, there are 6 factors that make Asia a very attractive place to be in the future. First, there's a lot of feedstock available. There's sugarcane, oils, cassava, there's a lot of cellulosic biomass, ranging from rice straw to fuel woods. There's a strong technology base, and even getting stronger, with a lot of government programs now in place to boost biotechnology. Just to mention, China has adopted that in their 5-year plan. Korea has a very vast biotech program. Other countries are following. The third factor why Asia is important as a biohub is growth. In fact, most of the growth of the chemical industry is going to happen in Asia. And you want to be where growth is, because new capacities will be required in Asia. The fourth element is infrastructure. In fact, Asia has a very well-developed infrastructure, from logistics to ports, but also chemical downstream capabilities. Fifth, and not well known, and I'll show you some slides afterwards, there's a strong consumer demand in Asia. In fact, Asian consumers are more aware about green products than many Western countries like the US or Europe. And fifth, and maybe the weakest of all of these points, the regulatory support. It's growing, and there is an increasing awareness of governments to create a stable regulatory framework. So let me illustrate a few of these points. The first one is about feedstock and location. In fact, from a feedstock production cost point of view, there are only 2 areas: Latin America, Brazil, and Asia, in the sense of Thailand, Indonesia, India, that have, and China, that have attractive economics to produce feedstock. When you see how well Asia is positioned to actually serve the growing areas like China, then you can clearly see there's a big advantage to be based in countries like Thailand or Malaysia or Indonesia to serve the customers in China. Actually, it only takes 7.5 days to transport from Thailand to China versus 40 or 50 days from Brazil. And there's a cost difference up to $40, $50 per ton for that. There's a lot of feedstock available, and you may not see this slide in the back, but actually India, China are second in sugarcane production. Palm are Indonesia and Malaysia are the biggest producers, and also other starch crops like cassava, which could potentially serve as a feedstock, where Thailand is a big producer and Indonesia as well. I talked about growth. In fact, Asia is going to be the growth driver for the chemical industry in the next 10 years. If you look at PE consumption per capita in China and in Thailand and in India and in other countries in Asia, it's still very low at around 10 kilograms per person. If that goes up to the US level of 40, there's tremendous growth for new plastics in Asia. Why not build that capacity based on biomaterials? This is an opportunity that we have now in Asia to take advantage of that growth and introduce bio-based materials rather than oil-based ones. It's much harder to replace oil-based materials in the US when there's no growth. I talked about consumer awareness. In fact, a study that we have conducted has shown that countries like India or China have a larger awareness in the population for green products. Both willingness to pay, but also potentially willing to pay if there is a green product. And as you know, many companies are introducing now green products. Toyota has just announced they will actually take a lot of the polyethylene produced in Brazil from bioethanol to put in their cars. We heard other examples during this conference. Let me conclude with a number of remarks on key success factors and what we see as important requirements for Asia to develop as a biohub in the future. The first remark is commercialization of products will take a lot of time. In fact, if you look at how the oil-based plastics took many years to introduce themselves into the market, PLA, as one example, is on a similar path, especially for new products, and many products made from bio-based resources will be new molecules, new products, new plastics. They will take time to take into the market, and commercialization is a very important factor. In fact, if you look at about 50 plastics applications on average, it took from 4 to 25 years for those plastics to get into the market because of the very high costs in the value chain to switch. If you have a new plastic, you need to change from the converter to the actual producer of the bags, and those switching costs typically are very high for new materials. So also from our perspective, please let's make sure that these new materials that you all are developing are actually going into the market. Even if it's slow, it will take off. Even the fossil-based plastics took a long time. And finally, Asian countries will need to have more collaboration among the stakeholders. There's a lot of good science out there. I saw very interesting posters yesterday from Japan, Korea, China, Thailand. A lot of good science is out there in Asia. There's a lot of companies out there that are starting with ideas. But in order to make this a success, we need to ensure that the feedstock supply is abundant and reliable. We need to make sure that there is a stable regulatory framework around how to support bio-based materials. that needs to have a long-term vision. Mandates need to take a 10-year plus horizon. And we need to ensure that universities, companies, and the stakeholders are much more closely working together in Asia to make this a success. I hope I have convinced you that bio-based materials in Asia is going to be the growth driver, and I hope I can maybe stand here again in 5 or 10 years and show you another graph that has shown how rapidly the bio-based materials have taken off in Asia. Thank you very much.